Well, everybody, welcome to Friday. It's good to see all of you. We're going to be with. Well, everybody, welcome to Friday. Let me turn this. It's good to see all of you. There we go. It's good to see all of you again. Today we're going to be with Buffy Kaufman. Buffy is top screen for me, so it's going to be wonderful to see her do her paintings. If you're on Zoom, you can ask questions directly. If you're on Facebook, then myself, Gabriel, Anna, Ethel, will all be looking at your questions and then sending them over. Hello, Rajat. Hello, Praful. Hello, Sandra. So with that, Buffy, it's great to have you. We didn't spend a lot of time with you yesterday. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hello.
There we go.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So do you have a slideshow?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We have that ready. And we'll just about to share screen. And Buffy, yes, you can just introduce us and the rest of our guests to especially share socials account so that the journey continues with Buffy, even after the session.
Thank you.
Let's share screen. There we go. Do we see this now?
See it.
Okay, carry on, please, Buffy.
Okay, this is my Facebook account. So Facebook at Buffy's Art. I'd love to meet some new friends today from this. So go ahead and send me a friend request. And my Instagram, to be honest, this serves as a blog for me. I'll usually write my color diary, what colors I've used and what tools, and also what has inspired me for each painting. So this is kind of the behind the scenes of my art journey. And my website is watercolorpour.com. And at the very, very bottom of my website, there's an option to sign up for my newsletter if you are in the California area and would like to attend an in-person workshop. Also, there's a little tiny Amazon button. So some of the supplies that I'll be using today, you might be able to find on my art page on Amazon. And this is my YouTube, and this is fun because I have been recording videos for quite a while now, so you can really see my progression and how I've started leaning more and more towards Daniel Smith colors and now use them exclusively. So I think there's around 80 videos on here, and some of the artworks in the slideshow, you can actually watch the painting being done as a tutorial. So yeah. This one, it's so interesting that Ethel and Catherine had chosen this one out of all my artwork, because this painting is actually done on an old piece of paper that was no longer, the sizing was no longer good. So it had pinholing and it had deterioration. So my challenge to myself was if I could get a painting to come out of it. So if you go to this video, for instance, on YouTube, you can watch my process of how to overcome sizing issues and how to play with so many different textures and colors. So it was a fun exercise of different techniques. And this is a watercolor pour where I used masking fluid. So it was done in many layers. And the little marbling in the background is something called paper marbling or suminagashi. And oftentimes I'll prep my paper with ink marbling and then paint over it. This is another watercolor pour that was painted in layers, where you mask an area and then you pour and then you mask another area, your next lightest value, and so on. This one was a combination of direct painting and pouring. And I really loved how the French ultramarine blue just added that little punch of color. This was a class demo, and as you can see, we were playing with salt that day. And, you know, they say that with things like that, you know, just a pinch, not to go overboard, but sometimes it's fun to go overboard and just see the different textures you get. So this one was a special piece. We named it Soul Stones, and I'm a rock hound, so I love looking for rocks at the beach and such. And this was actually painted during a time of mourning, and so it was very therapeutic to, you know, think of a loved one and think of your emotions and then put them on paper. And I have to say that this is, albeit very simple, there's so much beauty and simplicity. And to me, out of all my paintings so far, this is my favorite. This has all the things I love. It has pouring, it has the paper marbling, it has that crazy sediment from the sepia, and the stencil lifting to create those positive and negatives.
Buffy,
Yes.
do you mind if you're interrupted during this presentation?
Not at all.
I think we have a question from Barbara, who is on Zoom right now. And Barbara, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thanks. Hi, Buffy. You, I guess, on your rock hound, the painting with a rock hound, you had some those little grid marks that are. Was that part of the masking and the pouring? How did you, you know, how they've got the texture in the rocks that sort of like a little grid?
Yeah, so this was kind of an evolution of my watercolor pouring technique. I have a hard time using masking fluid because I find when you finally lift the masking at the end of your painting, the outcome is not always what you wanted. You don't get those
Exactly.
nice lines. It's a hard lines. So I've been trying to develop over the past couple of years a cheat or a way around it. And so I started to do stencil lifting, and hopefully I'll have time to demonstrate that today.
Okay.
But I make stencils, and when the painting's done or near done, I'll lay it down and I'll gently lift back. And so areas where I want to bring back white or light of the paper or add texture, patterns. Yeah, it's a really fun process and a good workaround if you don't like using masking fluid that much.
Right. Right. Thank you so much.
You're
Very
welcome.
interesting.
This was also a watercolor pour and a lot of fun. You can really see how I use the masking effectively on this one in the fun bark texture on the trunk of the tree and in the palm trees. It doesn't always work out though. So it takes a lot of patience, and but this one I had a lot of fun with. This one was another of, you know, more of a therapeutic piece where I was basically painting a memory where I didn't have a photo reference. I didn't have anything to go by. So I just I used some of my stencils I had created and just, you know, allowed a time of expressive painting.
Cool.
Those were great.
Thank you.
So Buffy, how long have you been painting?
I've been involved in some form of art making or mark making my entire life. I played around with a lot of sketch and wash. That's how I started off with watercolor. And then I believe in 2017, I took my first watercolor workshop and I was introduced to Daniel Smith paints by Helen Schaefer Garcia. Hi, Helen, if you're on. And she's been painting with Daniel Smith since the 80s, the late 80s, I believe. So I set my other paints aside and I really started to dive into my studies and taking workshops and demos and so many art books. And yeah, so I feel like I've always dabbled in painting, but I didn't get serious with it until 2017.
Awesome. And did you have any formal experience, formal training?
No, I'm completely self-taught.
Well, your work is beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you would like to start, and then people can ask questions, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Your connection's fantastic.
Perfect. Okay, so today I was thinking of sharing, first I'll share my palettes. Since we're here at Daniel Smith talking about colors, right? This is my Limitless palette, I like to call it. It's Hansa Yellow Light, Quinacridone Sienna, Quinacridone Red, Quinacridone Magenta, Phthalo Turquoise, and Phthalo Blue Red shade. And of these colors, I feel that I can mix almost any color as far as colors that please my eye and that I enjoy. You know, some colors, of course, are harder to get, like a cobalt teal, but here you can see some of the beautiful colors you can get. And this is close to a cobalt, you know, in that world. And you can see just lovely browns all the way to black to these peachy carnation colors. So I really enjoy this palette for teaching because I feel that when you learn color mixing, you can push all the Daniel Smith colors so much farther by just adding a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And then yesterday, I mean yesterday, I had to get another one of these palettes. They're Michael Solyev, I believe how you say it. He does these, and they're called Echo palettes. I just love them. They're bamboo. And so if you like working with limited palettes, for instance, here I could have my bright colors and my earth colors, and I can pop them in a bag with little to no, you know, hardly any supplies at all, and go off and paint.
Okay.
I love those palettes. And then I wanted to show another palette that you guys might like. And these are called, these are by Whiskey Painters, and they're called naked palettes. So anyways, they come completely empty, and then you can fill them however you like. So with this one, I was able to fit 15 full pans, a little stick of cobalt teal, and then a travel brush. That's another fun kit, and these are the colors that I chose for it. And then they also have a large palette. And this palette, I can get my 18 core colors of Daniel Smith, my dot card, and then I can fill the sides with all the fun sticks that I'm playing with at the time. So I like to have a set of colors that you use all the time, because then you're going to unlock all of their attributes and all the magic that comes with those colors. But so I really like this palette that I can interchange the sticks, because you know, every week we hear about more coming out. So I always want to have some of that. I think I might take the cobalt teal. And as I'm going, if any of you have any questions, you can ask while I'm painting. This is a quick little chart I did of watercolor vignette patterns. So today when I'm painting my background, I'll be doing a vignette pattern, meaning that I'm going to be leaving some of the paper white. And the point of it is to help send the eye to your focal point. It really helps with storytelling, and it's kind of dynamic. It's one of my favorite. You don't see it so much. But today I'm going to be painting some Black-Eyed Susans. And it started from a photo one of the artists that attend my workshop sent in of these lovely Black-Eyed Susans from her garden. And I like to break things down as far as I can from the source. So I started with this, and this was my first painting that I did using my Limitless palette. So using these colors. And so you can see I have a vignette pattern in the background, but I wanted to break it down even farther. So during class, I did it again. And you can see I'm stepping away from my source, my reference, but I'm becoming more and more expressive as I go. And so today I I like to paint in series until I get it as far as I can go. This might be as far as I'll go, but I figured we can just keep on this process and see where it ends up today.
Buffy, there was a
So I'll
question that was
set-
asked. Oh,
I'm sorry,
there's
go
a
ahead.
question that was asked by Sandra. Did you mention something called Marveline?
Yes, paper marbling, and it's also referred to as suminagashi. It means floated ink or floating ink. And so I take a tray of water and I add waterproof ink. I use Higgins ink, and I basically do it in rings. And there's some videos of it on my YouTube if you're interested in it. It's an art form all in itself. It's you know, I'll show you guys something. So this is what it looks like if you do a standalone print. Often looks like wood grains and that kind of thing. So I like to do them. It's a whole nother art form that I do, but I also like to do it to where I just get a swirl or two, just a whisper of the charcoal. And that way I can then paint on top of the paper, and it kind of, I don't know, it just adds something to it. I call it paper prep. Just adds a little whisper in the background, but it's really fun. And I've broken it down to just a couple of ingredients: the watercolor, the paintbrushes, and the ink. Whereas traditional paper marbling, there's a lot of other stuff that they use to where you can't really paint over it. So
Very nice.
what I was going to say is that when I first start out, I'll often start off with my reference photo, but then as I move along, I'll choose to create a new design or composition. So I'll take a bunch of photos and take bits and pieces from it and create new composition over new composition. And then eventually I won't paint from the photos anymore. I'll paint from my painting. And that helps me break it down even further. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up some color.
Okay.
Paper are you using?
Oh, already got there.
I'm using Winsor & Newton
Hot press or cold
100%
press?
cotton cold press.
Say that again?
Winsor & Newton
Yeah,
100% cotton cold press. So
Thank you.
Yeah, Winsor & Newton has two though. They have student grade and professional grade, and I recommend getting the professional grade.
It's 140 pounds.
Yes.
Okay. Do they have a bright white?
I don't know. I believe so. I
Okay.
believe so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really, they're my favorite. I use so much water in my paintings that I really love the fibers and how they open up and how the colors blend on the paper, but I'll also use arches, and I'll also use Fabiano soft press. I'll set my stick right into my ramekin and melt it down, and that's how I've been using them. And I'll also, can you see my palette? Yeah, I'll also wet my colors just so they're nice and soft and ready to mix.
Buffy,
Yes.
I don't know who that is. Is that me? I hope not. Are the mixing trays porcelain in that bamboo palette?
You're talking about the white mixing area?
Yes. Uh-huh.
No, I'm not sure what that's made out of.
But
It's not porcelain. It's yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look it up.
But it's not plastic.
No, it stains. It does stain, but I don't mind that. So what I really like about the Echo palette is that it's hard to find a palette where you can mix up a batch of colors. So Michael has his and he fills these with his main colors, but I like to use this to mix up, batches of watered down mix, and then use this for straight mixing. So these are metal, they all pop out, they have little magnets already, And then this, it might be melamine, I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna quickly mix up some core colors. My first one was Hansa Yellow Light with a little bit of quinacridone sienna. And then I'll just swatch it to make sure it's working out for me. Quinacridone sienna, I think, is probably one of my very favorite colors of Daniel Smith. It is just best friends with everybody. You can invite him to any party, he's gonna get along with everyone. And he really, it's a standalone color, but its true value is how it mixes. So you can add a little bit of the phthalo turquoise and you can take it to a really beautiful brown color, like a quinacridone sienna or a burnt umber. Or you can take it and add more heavy on the turquoise and get a really pretty, you know, olive color or nature, you know, just think nature inspired greens. I mix them up to like a tea consistency, just a little bit leaning towards a milk. Let's see, I also want a real lovely blue color. So I'm going to take the phthalo blue red shade and the turquoise, mix those together. It's a nice soft blue. And what I'm looking at on my swatch is I'm just seeing how the colors are getting along. Are they blending okay together? Let's see. I think I'll do a magenta color too. And I'll add just a little tiny bit of that sienna. A benefit of having a limited palette also is that a lot of times it's not too hard to get colors to get along because you're using the same colors in your mixes. So they'll tend to do okay together. I think that's a good start. Although I do want a little bit of
Buffy,
yes.
we have a question in the Zoom chat is with your ramekins, are they removable from the?
Yes, so this is a Muffin Tin Palette. They're a little hard to find. This one's metal by Cheap Joe's. They don't carry it anymore, but you can get a muffin tin off Amazon and use it. And these are ceramic heavy duty little ramekins. But I also use these melamine ones that you can get on Amazon and they just pop in and pop out.
And that was the
Otherwise-
other question. Where do you get them?
So these ones are from Sawyer Ceramics, like Tom Sawyer. And these ones are on Amazon and I don't know the name of them, just melamine sauce dishes. Or if you go to that Amazon link at the bottom of my website, I have them listed, I believe, under art supplies.
You could
That
get
makes
some
sense.
of those oven ones. What you make? Rubber. Forget what.
Can you repeat
What
that, Ian? Hi, Ian.
The ones that you get for buns. Is it cellulose?
Silicone.
Silicone. Cellulose.
Oh, the mold.
Silicone ones, they quite easily got hold of that you could hold the ramekins in.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a really good idea. And they
And
pop
they're
right
quite
out.
cheap, them, aren't they?
Yeah, I liked the standalone, just using a muffin tin as a palette. But the problem is that I'm always mixing my colors and maybe I'll move from this painting to something else. I can take these out, stack them for later, and then pop new ones in. So, all right. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Or dare I even mention a Yorkshire pudding tray?
Hey, you know what? I tell my the artists that come to my workshops to go to like Cost Plus World Market or vintage shops and go find your own sauce dishes or ramekins. And then you could even pick some out that match your personality or your style. I mean, some of the ones that I've seen artists bring to class are really exciting, some of the things they find. So this is always my first step, guys, is color. It all begins with color and ends with color. So when I mix up my colors, once I'm happy with how this color trail looks, I'll begin painting. And then when I'm done painting, depending on how the colors work out, it will determine how, you know, happy I am with my painting. Okay. To get started, I'm going to wet my background in a couple of places, and I'm going to make that vignette, or I'm going to start that vignette pattern. If someone could let me know when we get to the halfway point. Typically what I would do is I would carve around everything in just water, and then I would pour my color using the plastic pipettes. But since we're a little short on time, I'm just going to try and move through it, and I'm sure you guys can get the gist of it. The only color on this palette that's granulating is the quinacridone sienna. But there are a lot of colors you can use in place of these to get that same color, you know, family, but get a little bit of granulation. For instance, the phthalo blue red shade is very, very similar in hue to your French ultramarine. Your Prussian green can make for a beautiful granulating green color that mixes well. And I also found that if you take a granulating color and you mix it with the staining phthalos, quinacridones that aren't so granulating. So if you take a granulating color and a non-granulating color, you might find some of the most beautiful color blends and color separations.
Buffy,
Yes.
someone in the chat, Carol, would like to know what brushes you like to use.
Ooh. So brushes. I forgot to say cobalt teal also has some granulations. There'll be a little bit of granulation. Right now I'm painting with, they're not watercolor brushes. These are, I believe these are mixed media or acrylic brushes by Silver. They're their Ruby Satin line, and I like them a lot. I tried them out for the first time recently, and I really like their snap, how much water they hold. I like that I can really depend on the angle, because as you probably noticed, I do a lot of carving. So being able to get into all the nooks and crannies are really good. I like King Art brushes. I like their Radiant series, their Original Gold, and their Finesse. All three make angle shader brushes, and I pretty much depend on the angle shader brush and the round brushes and maybe a liner or two for most of my work. So it's important to have that they have angle shader brushes. And then I just bought these beauties. Oh, I gotta show you guys. Oh my gosh, look at this. My first Escodas. It's from you guys. You made me buy this. Oh, so watching the lives and seeing all the beautiful Escoda brushes. These are Ingrid Buchtal, And it's a beautiful set. I'm almost scared to use them. I don't think I've ever had something quite as, they're carved. I mean, these are just beautiful. So I would say I'm a big fan of King Art, Escoda, and then my new friends here, the Ruby Satins.
Buffy. Hello.
Someone's gonna ask what. Someone's gonna want to know about your brush holder, so I'll ask that now.
This guy?
Yeah.
It is a soap holder, and it's made out of marble. I have a wood one too, so if you just Google soap holders, again, you can find one that matches your personality, but they're always ribbed like that. So it works well.
That's wonderful. And I think Ian was starting to talk.
Yeah, Buffy. Have you tried a dagger brush or a sword brush? Might find them interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind giving them a try, but I have not yet. I pretty much have stuck with script liners, angle shader brushes. Recently, I've been trying, what are they called? Triangle brushes. Those are huge. I like the triangle. So what I did was I just added a little bit of water because I want to have hard edges and soft edges. So just connecting those. Just so you guys get the idea of how I do my very wet on wet backgrounds. And then I'll leave it and I'll let it dry, and then I'll come back later if it needs more. But I want it to dry while I'm painting my flowers. So hopefully it'll be dry enough that I can show you guys the stencil lifting that I do. The idea when you do a background like this will be to just move across the page, keeping it wet all the way. So that way you don't get any blooms or blossoms. But since I'm doing a floral, it doesn't really matter if I get those because I can work them in to create foliage and negative afterwards. Another great tool that I highly recommend are fine spray misters. I mean, I could literally almost spray this completely off if I wanted to. So if you had a big mistake while it's still wet, you can just spray it off. It also works really good for soft edges. This is the Hansa Yellow light with a little bit of quinacridone sienna. I don't care if it touches the background or we get some bleeds. Like I said, I like to kind of deconstruct my subject. And by doing that, giving myself permission to be expressive, I find that the entire painting experience is that much more enjoyable. I wanted to thank you guys for everybody that tuned in today. I really appreciate you being on, and I'm still in shock that I'm here, having watched you guys do these for so long and admiring so many artists and their tools and their supplies. I can't believe that I get to share today. It's an honor and it's exciting. Just moving down from light to dark. Even though these are Black-Eyed Susans, I'm still in my head thinking about, I just want to find out what colors get along. So I'm not too worried about local color. If at the end of my painting, all it says is loose flowers that are calm, and nature, have, you know, a nature palette, that is good for me.
Buffy,
Yes.
although you can see the narrative of the image that you're painting and in other paintings that you do you consider yourself to be slightly abstract?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
A little bit of a
Because
cracked
you're so
photo.
zoomed into the thing, it kind of like takes it into a slightly different realm.
Yeah, I think for me, when I, first started painting, it was just so important. I wanted, probably like many of you can probably relate to this, but you want to have the technical ability. You want to be able to paint like somebody or somebody you saw, or, you aspire to be like so-and-so. And so what you're doing is you're constantly caught in this trap of comparison where you're comparing your work to others. And it's a box. Try to stay out of it, because we each have our own way of our handwriting, for instance, and so unique also is our art. And so in 2020, we had a family tragedy, and all of a sudden everything just went out the window, and none of that mattered to me anymore. My art became just this incredible refuge, and I would go out in nature and find some quiet and photograph and whatnot. And when I would get back to my studio, all I wanted to do was to catch that calm feeling that I had in nature. And the technical aspect, how well I'm painting, what others would think of it, it was just broken. Like, it broke that down. It didn't matter anymore. And I found like this wonderful experience in a horrible time of life, as far as what direction my art was going in. And so I kind of say my art's kind of broken now, and it took a broken heart to get to that place. But if any good could ever come out of such horrible things and happening, then I feel that art can be a wonderful place to retreat to in times of mourning or times of great trial. And I don't know if any of you can relate to any of that, but so now, whatever people want to label it as, a semi-abstract or whatever, I just tend to think of it as broken down. It's broken down into atmosphere, mood, and color, value, if I can remember, composition, if I'm thinking that much ahead. But more than anything, I found that, there's so many times in life where our words will just fail us. We have all this stuff going on, but how do you get it out? What do you do with it? And if you stow it, it'll tend to come out at the, at the wrong places. So I found that, when I'm in nature, I feel closest to God. I feel peaceful, calm. So, or even in my garden, I have a little quiet spot that I'll go and I'll daydream about a painting for a really long time before I'll paint it sometimes, just thinking about what I want it to look like, that kind of thing.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. It was a direct message. It says from Elizabeth. Do you always start from the back? Like I guess the background.
Oftentimes I do, yes. Yes, I will. I'll tend to work from the background and work my way forward. A lot of times it's because I'm trying to say who the main character is. I don't want my background to compete with my foreground. So I'll do my background first, and then that way I kind of set the stage for the main character to come forward.
Buffy, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing about art being a refuge in a quiet place. I think a lot of us empathize with that, and also are having a lot of response on Facebook with the same. Thanks for your vulnerability.
Thank you. If I could share one thing with anybody in art, would be to let it be an expression of you. I mean, yes, there's times where we have to pay bills. So some of you are working artists. And so, you know, if you do commissions and that kind of thing, you know, of course, you're going to have to, you know, paint a certain way or whatnot, but carve out some time, you know, for you to paint what you like. You know, I remember I got to go into a Wyland art studio, and Wyland does all the marine, you know, the whales and the dolphins and such. And so you have this incredible art gallery. I mean, just these tremendous paintings, technically executed to the T. And you go into the far back corner and you found all these things he was working on, complete abstracts, black and whites, tonal studies, just amazing work. And I just remember thinking, oh, you know, his box now, he's in a box of having to produce a certain type of painting, but good for him that he finds a way to still express, you know, other areas. I'm gonna dry right here so I can do a little stencil lifting while I work on a little bit more of this.
Okay, we had another question. It was Jim on Facebook, and he was wanting to know about your point of interest, but I think what he is really maybe going for is, can you talk a little bit on the composition of this piece?
Okay, so I started off with I wanted to have a cascade through. So sometimes you want to have, you know, a focal point. So often our focal point will be an area of highest contrast. So if I, you know, darken around this flower, make it brighter or more saturated, it's going to stand out in the background. And other times I just like to have a color journey where when you look at the painting, your eye just moves up and around in a flowing way. So for this painting, I wasn't worried too much about having, you know, a traditional composition as much as having a flow. I have a stencil I'm going to use. So I'm going to hurry up and dry right here to help connect these two and try and get that pathway a little bit more defined. So that's why I left this area blank. Thank you for your questions, guys.
Thank you for sharing.
May I ask if you're using a hair dryer or a heat gun? It's
This
not
is
making
the-
any noise.
This is the Ranger Heated Craft Tool. It's a heat gun. It's kind of stinky. So if you're sensitive to smells, I would not recommend it. But it's heated and it's super low. It doesn't push my water around. So when I have a real heavy wet on wet, it won't push it around. It'll just dry. It also kind of focuses what you're drying. So I could leave this wet to let it continue to blend and then dry a, you know, specific area.
Buffy,
Yes.
do you ever wet the back of the paper to give yourself any extra working time?
No, I don't.
No.
No, I've tried it. I've seen a lot of artists. I studied, the artist I studied when I was learning watercolor or diving deeper was Tony Couch, Edgar Whitney, you know, and a lot of the masters, you know, they did that. They would wet both sides and just lay it. A lot of them work vertically. I usually use my little friends here to give it just a little bump. So I have a little bit better of a view.
Right.
But
I've got names now.
I typically don't paint vertically because I'm so wet, it would just run all over my lap. And I don't do the wet on the front and the back.
I was wondering about the stuffed animals. I didn't know if that was a therapy thing, but That is super cool. I might have to add those to my studio for sure.
You
Yeah,
know
they're
it?
adorable.
Aren't they so cute?
Are they
And you can-
whales?
Yeah, they're little whales. Look at the tail.
Oh,
They were great for the risers. You know, you could buy I think it's accurate slide SLYDE risers, and they're plastic and it'll do the same thing, just give you that really low angle. You can use a paper towel roll, but there's an Etsy artist that used to make these, and so I thought they would be perfect.
they're totally San Diego.
So if you get one, you've got to send me a picture of what you
Give
get
me
made.
twinners.
Okay, so another art, I call it an art form in itself, is stencil making. And I make stencils from my photography. And why I do it is just having that shortcut of not having to mask, wanting to be able to lift back. One of the things I found that I didn't like to paint was foliage and stems. So I'll make stencils and use those instead. So this one was me standing under a eucalyptus tree facing up, and it had just a clear blue sky. So I was able to go into Photoshop and select the shapes I wanted to keep. And then I used a Cricut, which is a stencil cutter or vinyl cutter, to cut it out. And I use this for everything. It makes stems, shadows, and even with these highly staining colors, I can still do a lift back. So talking about connecting.
You know where it needs that, Buffy?
Yeah,
Some little silhouettes of fairies.
that would be cool. Butterflies, fairies. You know,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
mind will explode if you let it with ideas. So I'm just picking out a spot that I want to lift to start giving you an idea. Of what it does.
Yeah.
And it's a really great way of dealing with any ugly spots you get too. So let's say you have like your painting was coming out wonderfully, and then you have that, you know, one spot where you're just so frustrated. You can go in and lift it out. You could do the same thing with some negative painting or such, but
If you've not got one of those crickets that you're talking about, you can go to a craft shop and get pre-made
yes.
foliage, can't you?
Yes, Tim Holtz has a wonderful collection of stencils. There's a website called stencilgirl.com that has some really beautiful stencils. I would caution though, if you're showing your work in a gallery, to check the prospectus, and that's how I got into using my own stencils, because I wanted specific shapes and I didn't want to have another artist's work, you know, so I would just be mindful of that.
We have a question on Facebook saying, do you have a video showing how to make the stencils?
So I want to say politely that I'm still kind of in that prototype stage where I'm still figuring out how to make them and what works and doesn't work. I have a ton of stencils that that don't always turn out like, so this is kind of where I'm at with it. Like these were, the shapes popped out and I still use them, as you can tell, but it's not necessarily something, I don't know. I mean, if somebody would be interested in seeing where I'm at so far with my stencils, I would definitely do a video. Like this one, half of it turned out. This one's actually really pretty. I'll show you.
Winder's asking if it's paper or not. I believe it's a kind of vinyl, isn't it? That's specific for stencil making.
Yeah, I use the graphics. So GRAFIX matte stencil. And it's a little bit expensive. You know, I think it's like a 4-pack for like $9. Which is why, you know, some people have asked me to sell them, and I just haven't been comfortable, you know, doing that because I don't feel that they're quite there yet. But if you get the graphics matte stencil, you could draw on it with a Sharpie and then cut it out with little scissors. Like I have these guys, Tim Holt scissors. Look how tiny the tip is. So like if you were just doing stems, for instance, you could take, you know, you could draw right on there some stems and then cut them out. I started off cutting them with scissors and with these heating stencil tools. And I'm too clumsy, so I ended up with quite a bit of burns. And I realized that I needed to find something that worked better for me.
Obviously, with this type of process, you have to be careful what kind of paper you're going to use, because otherwise it with inferior paper, you might end up tearing the paper up.
That's true. That's definitely true. So if it's sketchbook paper, you'll see me rub like this. But if it's, you know, professional, it's just taking some time, but you'll get a feel for how hard you can scrub and what the paper can take. If you're going to be painting over that area again, you want to be careful not to rub too much. Otherwise, you're going to get, you know, it's going to look funny, like when you overwork your painting.
And the brush you're using, is that a basic toothbrush?
Yeah, it is a bamboo toothbrush, and I use medium. If you do soft, it's just not going to show up. I think I want a couple more connecting these flowers just to kind of show you guys the idea I had for back to that composition question.
This is so neat. I mean, you have the positive image in the stencil, but it's leaving the background in the background. It's fascinating.
Yes. If you guys have done any kind of negative painting, and I'll show you that next if we have time. Oh, we got a couple minutes. You know, it can be so powerful doing negative painting. Basically, you're painting around a shape instead of painting the shape, right? But if you're doing anything little or tedious, it can be really hard to get a good, nice image. Kind of like masking fluid. Masking fluid, you'll have those little, or if you have shaky hands. I don't know if any of you have shaky hands. Sometimes I do, but I find that this just helps me get those neat little organic images. And then for larger pieces, then, you know, I can do the negative painting. So for instance, yes.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Ian.
I just wanted to tell you, you're over halfway.
Okay, I'm just going to darken a couple spots, and then I'll probably have to finish after the demo.
We had a question if you are using tape.
Around the border?
Anywhere else on the image, or just around the border to keep the paper connected?
Just today, I just put a piece of Scotch tape right here to separate my color trail. And then I did some Pro Artist tape or gaffer's tape around to hold my paper down. The board I'm using is interesting. They're by robax.com, and here's their website. How convenient, right? But it's textured, so when you tape your paper down, that tape grabs just a little bit more than like a gator board or foam board or whatever. And it has the textured side and then a smooth side, and the smooth side works pretty good as a palette also for mixing color. So to finish up my painting now in the next stages of what I would be doing is a kind of a push and pull of value. Value is the second ingredient to my paintings. And so first is always color. And then what I'm going to try and do is a minimal amount of, defining some of these flowers, pushing them forward and backward in order to just get it to sing. And lastly, I would just say, you guys, don't forget to take the walk. Don't forget to put your painting up somewhere and walk across the room. And that is a really good way to identify where you need more value. Or take a photo and make the photo just as tiny as you can, like a little tiny thumbnail, and see how your values are stacking up. But I just want to thank you, John and Catherine and Ethel and the Daniel Smith team for welcoming me and including me today. It has been just an honor.
You are so welcome. And so, Buffy, will we be able to post your finished work?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. You showed us so much today. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I have one question, which we always ask everybody. It's kind of an unfair question, possibly. When do you know you're done?
So if it's a practice painting, I'll just keep going until I've kind of figured out whatever I'm trying to figure out about, the technique or the colors or whatever. If it's a production painting, like today, this painting is kind of a milestone painting, being that I'm with all of you. So I'm going to paint it with as least amount of strokes as needed to get the feeling that I wanted to portray, which is just the joy of being here today and being a part of the Daniel Smith team. So I literally could be done in 2 paintbrush strokes. It just it's the feeling for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Buffy. And thank you everybody for watching. Please go to Buffy's site and see her work, and she's open for questions as well. So that'd be fantastic. Thank you for joining today. Look to see all of you next week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And bye-bye. Thank you, Buffy.
Thank you guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
Buffy.
Bye.
Thank you.